Hi, and welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. Now, unfortunately, we had a guest lined up, Mark Farnell, who's an investigator and a filmmaker, but unfortunately, he cannot come on tonight, and as yet, we have not got a replacement guest. So it looks like you've got me, that's Les, and Paul Sinclair tonight, and we've got a few questions coming in, so we'd really hope that you can get a few more questions on there for us tonight, just to help us get the stream out to you. For a little bit of housekeeping now I've got to do. It's we've got to thank everybody who's donated in the past and to the live stream, which is it's been fantastic. It helps us keep the streams on. We're in the middle of making a feature film, some of you may or may not know, and that helps us continue making the feature film. So thanks again everybody who supported us. You can either support us on the Facebook Truth Proof page by a PayPal link, or you can use tonight's super chat at the bottom of the chat screen to donate anything you want. So without further ado, I think one more plug we've got to give. I will now. Here's the truthproof .uk web page. I'll get there, Paul. Truthproof.uk web page. Now we've got to say at this stage, if you've got any accounts in anything unusual, mysterious, in a cryptid or UFO type subject, then please get in touch with Paul on his webpage. All the contact links are there, so obviously Paul will then pick up all the mail and everything from that page. So there's the webpage. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to come back, I think, and bring Paul Sinclair in. Welcome, Paul, to the live stream channel tonight on Truth Proof.
Hi, Les. Good to talk to you, and hello everybody that's in chat. We're a little bit, everything's just gone in air tonight. Not Mark's fault, these things happen, but we literally did find out 10 minutes before coming on air, so we couldn't find anybody to replace him, as Les has said. No doubt we'll have Mark in a few weeks, I hope, because I want to hear what he's got to talk about with the Pendle Witches and other bits of information. But as I say, help us out if you've got some questions in chat, and let's just fire away. Is there anything that you want to ask me, Les?
Yeah, I'm looking through the chat now, and thanks to Leslie who's forwarding the questions to us tonight, so we can obviously concentrate on the questions that are coming in. And don't forget, guys, if you've got any questions, keep them in capitals. It helps us then distinguish those from ordinary chat. I'll get my teeth in tonight, Paul. Right. Justin Apple. Welcome to the stream, Justin Apple. Nice name, by the way. I like that one. Paul, there are a lot of balls of light related to the Skinwalker Ranch. No. I'll start off with another one, Paul. Sorry about that one. I've come in a little bit early. Yeah. Big Jimmy Cub. That's another good name. Welcome to the show, Big Jimmy. Paul, you have mentioned orbs of light that don't seem to illuminate the sky around it, and you've mentioned that quite frequently, Paul, haven't you? This sounds like a holographic projection. What are your thoughts on this? That's Big Jim.
It's a good idea, a good theory. It could be, Jimmy. You know, I mean, as I always hold my hands up and say, I don't know what they are, but I do know that they do appear from nowhere, which could fit in with your theory, because they literally just switch on in sky and switch off. So it's not supposed to be the woo. It could be something that's been tested or experimented with the military. What takes me away from that theory, Jimmy, is the fact that they've been reported, well, since 20s and 30s. And it's a similar phenomenon. So if it was something that were being tested holographically, you would think they'd have refined it, or would they have been doing it decades and decades ago? But I'm not going to discount what you're saying, because you know, you could be right with it. I can never get my head round when people have seen these things, and I've jumped to Lee Hayward's sighting with me as being the sort of the best one that I've seen, and I've seen these things quite a lot. I were up there till turned 11 o'clock with Steve Ashbridge last night. We saw nothing. We might jump to what did happen last night. It's no big sort of mystery, by the way, but we might jump to that later. As I say, because we're just talking on the hoof here, so I thank you for this question. But me and Lee Hayward's sighting, that were at the back of us in the field. And I've said it before, but it were huge. These 3 spheres like a snooker ball set up. And they just kind of imploded on one another. And I usually say that they project no light, but we've never seen them as close. They were huge, and you could see a halo around them that were forming a glow on the field. Lee did a great write-up for us. I don't know, Jimmy. You know, I mean, you could be on the money with this. I mean, it could be some holographic projection from some other intelligence. It's not forced to be man-made. And on that note, I think I've answered all I can. And Deborah, thank you for contribution. Really appreciated. And I was scratching my head to think of somebody who could fill in for Mark tonight, and I ought to have given you a ring. But we're going to roll with this now on the hoof and fire away, Les. Hotels.
Yeah, we'll come back to Justin Apple then. And Paul says there are lots of stories of balls like related to the Skinwalker Ranch and the missing 411. They seem malevolence in nature. Do you think they may be responsible for any animal mutilations?
Do you know, it's another one. It's another good one because the balls of light seem present. You know, if you look for them, I mean, I suppose if you look for anything, you can find it. But I mean, this is unexplained phenomena, which is not something that occurs every day. But when something unusual happens, around that time, there's usually reports of these spheres of light. You know, so it's a good point. I mean, I was sort of struggling, thinking, what am I going to talk about tonight? But fire the questions at me, guys. I don't mind stopping, but I think we'll talk about what we called Cliff Lane and what were happening, and we'll call it the animal mutilations, and what were happening in 2016, 2017. You'll have to bear with me because all this information just in front of my mind, but I first found out that things of an unusual nature were taking place when we went to Danes Dyke to give somebody some food on New Year's Day 2017. And the guy who lives in the dyke told me that the police had just been, and I asked him why, and he said that there'd been some animals killed in and around the East Coast area, Benton in particular, sheep killed. And eventually I found out the farms, went and spoke to one of the farmers and said, you know, would you let me have a look into this for you? Nothing to do with unexplained phenomena. Obviously that's my subject, that's my chosen subject, but I think everybody in the chat, everybody who's serious about the subject knows that we've got to look for the sort of logical first before we start looking for the illogical. So I found the farmer, asked him if he'd mind letting me have a look into it, and I got permission to go on the land, and eventually I started finding these animals that had been killed in unusual circumstances. But before we get to that, let me just tell you what was happening all sort of packed around this subject. Now, there's a guy, I'm not going to say his name, he's lived in Bempton. I've been in Bridlington probably 30 years, and I know because I worked with him 28 years ago that he's been in Bridlington as long. And he was working shifts at this particular time, and he lives in Bempton, and depending on shifts, he would walk up Cliff Lane and along the cliff tops and do a big tour sort of down Hoddycow's Lane and went to locations in through Buckton back to his home, morning or night, with his dog. And he contacted me in June of 2017. I don't know how I think of these things because I can't remember my kids' birthdays, but it was June 15th. If you check the book, Truth Proof 3, you'll find it. It was June 15th, 2017. He said, Paul, he said, I'm walking up Cliff Lane today, he said, and there's a pea crop on the right-hand side. He said, and I've been coming up sort of for weeks, and I'm watching the crops grow. He says, and there's a triangle in the top of the pea crop, a triangle of earth, just clean, just cut out. He says, I think you ought to come and have a look at it. So the following morning, really early, I mean, but this guy were walking, I met up with him, and I took some pictures at pea crop, and I think the pictures I've put in the book. It was like a wedge of cheese or cake, if you know the shape in top of field, and I thought that's interesting. So the next day, I get up at stupid o'clock with my little dog Wolfie, and Peacrop's about 18 inch high, and I decide I'm going to go up the field side. I don't trample any crops. I want a soil sample. So that's exactly what I did. I lost the dog. I couldn't believe it. And dog was going to be my excuse if somebody said, "What am I doing on field?" I was going to say I'd lost him anyway. But I could just see it moving the crop. It was because he's tiny. When we got the dog, I ended up carrying him up under my arm because he's not really a terrier or oat. He's really a toy dog, really. But anyway, gets to the pea crop, takes the soil sample. There's a vehicle watching me on the road at the bottom. Nothing sort of Men in Black or anything like that. It was Silver 4x4. And they then turned up what's known as Blake Howe Lane, because that's where I would have come out. And I think they were going to just ask me what I was doing at silly hour. It would have been about 5 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, I'm not there to steal anything. There's a pea crop that's only half grown, but you've got some unusual, some daft blokes stood in a field, but for want of a better word. So when they went up Oddy Cow's Lane, I sort of made my way back other way and back down home. I just didn't want to explain myself. So we got the triangle. So all that was happening around the same time. I wouldn't say next to where these sheep killings were taking place, and the badgers and the roe deer, but in fairly close proximity. So I've got the soil sample, which hasn't been tested. We put a Geiger counter on it. It didn't tell us anything. Let's be honest about this. So same guy, the morning of June. It was June, same year, obviously. I think it was maybe. I know it was 28th, because I went to speak to the farmer, and I'd already got this information when I went to speak to the farmer. You see, that's what I'm saying, guys. These things were happening before I got in contact with the farmer. So I went to speak to the farmer. And 28th of June, let's get back to this guy. He found a roe deer dead at the side of the road. Well, just on off the verge. Didn't look like it had been hit by a car, but it had got a 3-inch round hole through its side. He sort of likened it to, like a flue pipe, the hole that they cut for a gas boiler. It were about that size. So we'd got this deer carcass, and I'd hold on to that date, the 28th of June, because it plays in later. Because when I went to speak to the farmer, and we're talking about these things, he'd got a diary of when he'd found these animals, because obviously he's got to, for insurance purposes, declare what's been found, Yeah. And so we'll get to his story briefly. And I've probably killed the punchline already, because, well, I know I have, but it doesn't matter. What he was saying, he came up to the 28th of June. He says the first time he realised anything really strange was happening was this date, and he told me about having this sheep run, that for doing the sheep's feet, bathing the sheep's feet, and the old 6 sheep nose to tail. And then they corral them and get them into a pen at the other end. And he says they ain't going in it, because it's really the solution that they have to run the feet through must be quite painful. It must sting them. So he said, I have 2 dogs. He says, and it's a hell of a job getting in and getting the feet into this, or getting them to run through it. He said, but this particular morning, he says, I came to see to the sheep. The run's all set up, and I can't believe what I'm looking at. And I can't remember the figure now. I think he said there were 30 sheep. Now, I'm not saying there were 30 and there were 13. I'm sure he said there were 30 sheep crammed into it, on the side, upside down, hanging over the sides. They were alive, but in it, he couldn't believe what he were looking at, because he couldn't get his dogs to get them in it easily in daytime, but somehow they'd done this in the night. He untangled them all, removed the panels. It's like a corrugated panel about 1 metre high. And I think he said there were 2 or 3 dead, which was suffocation. Nothing untoward apart from stress. But what was interesting was the date, the 28th of June. Now, I'm not going to say this guy's name, but if he listens to this, he will know I'm telling the truth. But the reason I'm saying that is, I've got my book with me, and I opened it. I said, "Here, look at that," because anybody could have written it in afterwards. Deer carcass found, 3-inch hole in its side, 28th of June. I don't know. We can't connect them. We can't say, yeah, A links to B. We can't say that, but we're in a similar area, and these things were happening. So that were one sort of quirky anomaly. I'll stop in a minute. Is there any questions of anything, Les?
Yeah, I think something in relation to that is Umbraman. Umbraman, welcome to the show, Umbraman. Well, let's have a look. Oh, if you could choose one entity to prove which exists, which one would you choose?
One entity to prove
to prove exists.
To prove that the phenomena exists. The phenomena is real. Which one would you choose? I don't know, because in the book that I wrote this year, The Night People, about my own experiences, and I mean, there's Jessica Pym in chat room. That's my daughter who's produced music tonight. She knows a lot of the stuff that's happened over the years, and I would say I can't prove it though. Who can prove it? I mean, Umbraman, how would we prove it without this? Some people in the chat, Deborah might want the proof for Deborah would be what she saw. I'm sorry for bringing you into this, Deborah, but the proof for Deborah Hartswell would be what she saw. She would want to present that because she's talked about it so much, and rightly so, that she would want to verify and stamp the proof. Now, I would probably what I've called the night people, because everything's just ingrained in here, and I can't unless science can create a machine. I've said this before, that can project what we're thinking onto a screen. We're never going to have when somebody creates that, we'll have the proof.
I think what this is, Paul, is it comes down to your own personal experiences.
It
because
does.
Obviously, you're then swayed to that thing existing. So it could be nothing to do with UFOs. It could be nothing to do with cryptids or anything like that. But it could be these lights. It could be lights what you honed in on. It could be anomalous lights that you see at Bempton. That might be the thing. It's
all his own preference, Les. It could be ghosts. Some people, for want of a better word, have seen ghosts, and or claim to have seen relatives at the end of the bed, and these apparitions. And I'm not saying they haven't seen them, but that when something's sort of impacted on your life that much, that's what you're searching for. You're searching for the answers to that. That's probably why I'm so in depth with research. I mean, obviously we jump all over the place, and we're on Dark Forest at the moment, but the other stuff doesn't go away. It never goes away.
I think there's you mentioned Deborah, and she is welcome, Deborah, from me into the stream tonight, and she's asking, she's saying, for me, the Ilf Encounters are on the increase. Is this the same for you, Paul?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure Deborah will have realised with people that are contacting her that not only are they on the increase, but to me anyway, they appear to be being seen, like we've just said, when other phenomena, even the cryptids are seen or reported, and the alien big cats, as in Alien to the UK. You're getting light phenomena, and the light phenomena the ghost phenomena gets mixed up for the light form phenomena, the ILFs as well. Danes Dyke being a perfect example, because I've had I won't say hundreds, but I've had quite a few reports of people who've said they've seen the White Lady at Danes Dyke, and I've said this before, and usually they talk about they've seen a sphere of white light. And they're perceiving it to be a ghost. There's the ghost of Big Railings, which I wrote about in the first book, which the rock anglers, I won't say every rock angler, but there's a good number of rock anglers up at Bempton, because that's where Big Railings is, this viewing platform, have said that they've seen what they perceive as a fisherman's headlight. And they've walked down towards it, and there's nothing there. They've seen it when they've been in the car park walking down to go fishing, and there's nothing there. Too many people have seen it over a massive amount of years, but that's, to them, is a ghost. No discredit to the guys, but it's the ghost of Big Railings. It's a sphere of light.
And let's have a look what we've got. HRH Hopper, welcome to the stream.
Yep.
HRH, that's not His Royal Highness, is it? Or well, the question is, could the fact that these lights that don't illuminate be because they follow the same science as a black hole, where any light is drawn into the centre and nothing escapes? No.
Good God, yeah, it could well be. I mean, you've probably got a lot better scientific background than me, HRH, but it could well be. you know, that's why it's so annoying. I love it when people ask about these lights because they do intrigue me. But that's why it's so annoying when people say it were flares or it were afterburners. I'm saying, hold on a minute, these things are stationary in the sky. You can't see smoke. They don't project from a boat. They don't drop from the sky. They just literally appear. And then they'll either appear, as in Dave Barker at Flamborough's sighting, and then just punch into a row, a multiple, probably 8 or 9 in Dave's sighting. And then at one point he said they look like a number 5 on a dice. Flares don't do that. Switch off and then appear in another part of the sky. You know, I know I'm jumping there, guys, but
so you know when you're at Bempton or Flamborough or anywhere off the coast there, on a good day, how many miles can you see out to sea?
Depending on altitude where you are, but you know, on them cliffs, Speeton and the higher points of Bempton, we've got 300 to 420 feet, 22 miles. But the lighthouse keeper did tell me, the retired lighthouse keeper a few years ago, he said it really is deceiving because he'd got somebody with him in the lighthouse. I mean, this guy was keen to stress that he was a proper keeper. He weren't, before it were automated. And they reported to Coast Guard that they could see unusual lights, and it turned out to be something over 50 miles away. Obviously, they're higher still in the lighthouse, but they just wouldn't have believed. So I suppose it depends not only on the altitude, the height of the cliffs, but also the weather conditions. You know, in prime weather conditions, you're going to be able to see further. Just because you can see to horizon, I mean, if there could be 15 miles out, there could be a lot of mist and distortion before that we can't perceive when we're still on them cliff tops.
Yeah, I mean, some great questions in tonight's chat, Paul. Don't you agree?
I'm pleased because I was short on things to talk about.
Yeah, with our guests not being able to come on at the very last minute, then it's. You're doing pretty well up to now, Paul. That's all I can say. No,
we're good. Let's just carry on with this.
Yeah, we've got some more questions. Yes.
Oh, come on then.
Right then, Gaz Gray. Welcome,
hi,
Gaz. Yeah, welcome. Yeah. Hi guys. For Paul, hopefully not too off topic, but when was your most recent night people experience, and do you believe anything you or those around you did manifested or sparked increased activity? I think you understand that question, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point because the actual intense activity that I wrote about, I mean, Night People started from childhood, and so the book finished in 2020, but things are happening. Like we said before, things are happening in Bob Brown's flat, 2 floors above us, and things are happening. There's something, and it's got an intelligence. I don't know whether it's attached to the things that happened in childhood, but I usually stay up a little bit longer than Mary, my wife, and when she goes to bed, it's not. I don't mean it happens every night, but she'll say to me, and it happened the other week. I was telling Steve about it. I think I've told Les about it. You, Les, and next morning she said that thing was on bed again last night. This isn't lucid dreaming when you've just gone to sleep. I've experienced this as well. This is so strange because it chooses its moments. And what she means by that thing is she's just got into bed. She's probably been in bed 5 or 10 minutes, and you can feel something sort of lightly jump on the bed. Everybody can picture if a cat jumped on the bed. It feels like that, but it slowly makes its way up the bed to the back of you. And she said, you'll kick your leg out and try and get it to go, and it does, and then it does it. It's not me, by the way, guys. and then it'll do it again, and it happens 3 or 4 times. Now, very rarely do I go to bed first, but it's happened when I've gone to bed first as well. It's happened once when we've both been in bed and we've both been aware of it and sort of like nudged each other because we've known it's happening. And it's weird because your senses, I don't think this is doing it, but your senses go on sort of ultra alert. You can feel your legs and your feet tingling because you know there's something happening that shouldn't be happening. It's a real strange one. And jumping back to Bob Brown, Bob's experienced it as well, and I don't think we've told Bob about what's happening here, because he said the other night he couldn't sleep all night. This will be about 3 weeks ago, so not the other night, guys. But anybody who knows Bob, you can ask him. And he said there was something on the bed. He says, and I just don't. He says, now I end up shouting in the end. Will you go? Will you go away? Yeah. So things are happening, guys. I don't know whether that's connected to the things that leave scars on your body and the other sort of business. I'm not going to say too much. I did a recording of one of my grandchildren with parents' permission, the 3-year-old who was in the spare room probably when the lockdown eased, and Mum said, can they stay for night, because I think husband were working or doing something anyway. And when she woke up in the morning, she's telling us that something with green eyes were watching her. She's 3, and I'm not saying, oh, she's imagined it, but I mean, it's an interesting recording, let's put it that way. And she just won't stop talking about it. And remember that a 3-year-old's got limited vocabulary, limited life skills to relate to anything. It was just something with green eyes. I've never seen anything with green eyes, not unless it's an animal that you're going to fire a torch at in dark. But fire away, Les.
Yeah, well, another interesting aspect, you already mentioned Bob. Now, Bob Brown lives in a flat in the house that you have, and he runs a radio show. Now, he runs, is it Beacon Radio?
Beacon of Light Radio.
Sorry, he contributes to Beacon of Light Radio, that's what I should have said. Yeah. And he's had some strange experiences while he's actually been recording a show. Can you tell us a little bit about them, Paul?
Yeah, well, Andrew Collins were on probably, 2 months ago. Might be a little bit longer. And because Andrew's been up to Bempton with us and that, when he'd got him on as a guest speaker, Bob said, do you want to come up and sit in? So I did, and I don't know, I don't think he knew I was there for the first 20 minutes, and Andrew's talking. And then the show's producer, I can't think of her name, it's Michelle, but I don't know her surname, contacted Les and said, excuse me guys, contacted Bob and said, in a private message, said, there's a voice come through that's neither Andrew's, yours or Paul's. I'm sat outside Bob, remember, at this time, and we'd been talking, and Andrew's describing what he thinks the phenomena is. And if anybody's ever heard Andrew, he goes off and he elaborates and what have you, and he was describing in Andrew's unmistakable way what the phenomena was. And a voice that we never heard but was very loud said, prove it. And we didn't say it. It sounded robotic. The show's producer pulled it out and sent it to me and Bob. I sent it to somebody who's pretty high up in music to have a listen to, and he sort of concluded that it was 3 times louder than audio coming from Andrew and coming from me and Bob. And he also worked out that it was in the room with us. It wasn't from Andrew's side. Just an interesting one, and then you've also got these strange entities, for want of a better word, that are walking through the room on a 3-story building. Upstairs, obviously, when he sat watching television, and he says like a dark shadow, as tall as ceilings, just walked through the room. And I think he's seen that twice. Yeah. And been in a few years, so he's not reporting these things every night, people. He's been in a few years. I think he's seen that twice, and he was telling me a few weeks ago that the bed were moving, and so much so that he had to shout and ask it to stop. So,
good,
just a strange one.
Yeah, strange. And just at this point, Paul, I'd just like to welcome everybody who's into the live stream tonight. It's great to have you here. You may or may not have heard, we have not got our guest on tonight, Mark Vanell. He couldn't become because of circumstances, so it's just me and Paul running the show. We really, really, really want some more questions in for you guys for us to continue the stream, because Paul has already alluded to, we have nothing. Paul has nothing prepared, so
it doesn't matter, Les. Yeah. It's all good. We just do what we do. So let's carry on with Cliff Lane and see where we go. Unless you've anything else, Les.
I just want to touch on something, Paul, just before we leave your house situation and the Bob Brown and the voices and the entities that walking through the room. Just for those people who have joined the stream and may not know, can you just give us a brief potted history about the house itself?
Yeah, well, I think we moved here in 1994 or thereabouts, and we bought this house. It'll make sense, this guy's in a minute. Fully furnished, and really old stuff, even to chamber pots under bed and cutlery on draining boards. It was a strange situation. Somebody had been left the house and they couldn't care less about the contents of the house and family pictures and everything. But so it already had a history. It already had a history of its own long before we came. It's a big old Victorian house, and whilst we were clearing it, we were finding and burning old bits of furniture and things. I was burning bags of letters, and I weren't really reading them. And eventually we opened some of these letters up and had a look, and what they turned out to be, I didn't understand them at the time, back in the 90s. We did eventually, but they were spirit letters. The people in the house had been performing seances on a regular basis, from what I can tell, and there were literally bags and bags of these letters in different writing, italic writing, sort of scribbly writing. It was all on the same page, different paragraphs, and there were loads and loads of it. And we'd only been in a few weeks when Reverend Willis, who, if anybody wants to Google this guy, I think he was known at one time as Britain's official exorcist, knocked on the door and asked if he could come and bless the house. We didn't ask him to, but he'd done it before, apparently. And so yeah, there was already a history of strange things happening in the house. With 4 girls, and all 4 girls will tell you that you would if you walked into a room, the what we've now got as our TV room, but it was a dining room years ago. If you walked into it, and in a dull light or in darkness, very often you'd see what we would call a drop of light. I know Jessica in chat's seen it. I know Sarah has, and Mary's seen it. And it'd just be like about the size of a teaspoon drop of light that just would drop to the floor and just vanish. I realise some of these things are hard to sort of get your head around, and you're thinking, Christ, how can all this stuff have happened to one family? But these things really were happening. You know, it weren't all bad. One night we came home after we'd been out, fell asleep watching TV. Mary had left me, as she likes to do, and we'd got a little staffy at the time, and he was sat at the side of me. And as I woke up in the darkness with my eyes shut, I could sense the dog there, I could feel his warmth, and I just opened my eyes, and on my right knee, there was something about the size of a big orange that was sparkling. And it just exploded, just like a glitter ball. It was just incredible. Just in darkness, no fear. And I actually said, wow, do that again. But nothing happened. Now, I don't know, I have no explanation for why these things happen. I'm pretty sure, because sometimes I haven't a clue what I write about, you know, guys, because I'm writing just constantly if I'm not out anywhere. But I'm pretty sure we didn't put this in the book. And I need to stress now, Don Lodge has been an enormous help with this book, and he's sort of restructured chapters for me, and I'm really pleased he did, you know, suggesting different things. And for some reason we didn't put this in, and it would have been titled The Guinness-Filled Hallway, this chapter, and it goes back to just a few years ago. And if I can just describe this room where we watch TV, you've got 2 glass doors to your left that go into the main living room. And then you've got, in the right-hand corner, you've got another door that goes into the hallway and the kitchen. And it's dark. Obviously, it's night time. And I'm watching TV. And these are the contrasting things that have happened. The ball, when I thought, wow, that's awesome. I enjoy that. But then I'm start watching TV and I fell asleep. That's the rule. That's generally what I do. So I'd nodded off, and I suddenly woke up. Sort of a start and feeling a bit uneasy, which is not normal. And I sort of looked around the room, and I don't know, it just felt strange. And I watched TV a little bit more, and it happened again. And I got the feeling that there was something close to my face. So there's only a little side light on it where TV is. And I'm sort of looking, and I'm sort of on high alert now. And the hallway's in darkness. And I just keep watching the hallway. And this is not something that I've sort of thought about afterwards and thought, well, maybe it didn't happen, maybe it did. I actually was absolutely fully awake. I saw this. And round the door from the hall came a mist at about, I don't know, 3 foot, 4 foot, just folding and curling. And I tried to think of the analogy. If anybody's watched a pint of Guinness filling in a glass when they're pouring it, and you see that swirling creamy liquid before it turns black, it looked like that. And it filled the doorway. I found it terrifying. I didn't imagine it. I really, really was frightened. And it just retracted. I got up, back to the wall, all the way around the room, and looked down the hall. It had gone. We didn't write. I don't think I put it in the Night People, but I know we're sort of still lingering partly on Gaz's questions, Gaz Gray. But you know, yeah, things are still happening, but not to the extent that they were. And I hope that's answered a few questions and made you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, really, I've got to ask the question, Paul. Is that you've had these experiences when you was living near Doncaster?
Yeah.
And so you're obviously open to all this phenomena of this type. So obviously this phenomena went on at the house that you moved to now before you moved there. And so really, what's manifesting, you're more attuned to it than anybody else, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just looking. Probably your missus having a smoke in the bedroom. Yeah, nice one. Yeah. There's nobody smokes in house, mate. And it weren't smoke, but yeah.
You know what I'm alluding to. It's like a medium. You know, they're open for, you know, people like that are open and they can, you know, everything comes to them, doesn't it? Really?
It's almost, you almost think at times though that everybody's life's mapped out to a certain degree. I mean, it'd be an horrible thing if we knew that were the case and we could actually look at what were going to happen to us. I mean, in a way, they're doing it now in medical science, aren't they? Because they can look at your genes and look at the genetic code and see what illnesses you're going to have and things. But in a more advanced way, it's almost like your life's mapped out, because before we moved, we lived on Sprotborough Road in Doncaster, and not a lot of things, nothing of any great note had happened there. So there'd been a few years, yet not within weeks, before we'd even moved in, things were happening at that house. The night that I slept there when I was trying to get some hot water to the property and things, when I was going up on my own before we'd actually moved in, and the spindles turned white, and I woke up with the little holes all in my arms. So it started fairly quick, Les, you know, from moving into that property. Then there's lots of other things. I don't know. There's maybe if people catalogued every strange thing that happened, you'd probably find that we've all got a life as rich with unexplained phenomena if we really looked for it. I mean, and I don't mean look for things that aren't there. I'm not imagining this weird swirling white whatever it was that came round the door. I'm not imagining it. I don't know why it projected so much fear onto me, because it were fear that I felt. Yeah, last night, as I say, we were up there on them cliff tops till late, and I do that on my own, and I don't, and you don't feel that same kind of edge, you know, like I think we said we'd touch on it last night. For example, there was a noise, nothing paranormal, but we did hear a noise below the cliffs, and we were stood on about 200-foot cliffs. Daft thing, it sounded like a car door slamming. You know, you've only got North Sea below you, but that's the kind of noise it was. But then, just for about 20 minutes, and Steve noted it as well, everything felt a little edgy, but that could be us as human beings just sort of putting a little bit of fear injecting a little bit of fear into ourselves without actually realising that's what's happening. But any more questions, Les?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do, I'll just try and get back to me. Hello, folks. Yeah. Okay. What I think we're going to do tonight, Paul, is because we haven't got the guest on. We're just going to run to a little bit of an early break tonight. And is that okay with you? And then we'll pick up when we come on the other side.
Unless you want to, I just want to carry on with Cliff Lane for a little bit.
Sorry, you carry on with Cliff Lane, Paul, and we'll go with that. Then we'll go to the break.
Yeah, okay, just 5 or 10 minutes. So we'd got to where the 3-inch round hole was found in the deer's side. Now, in July, from Cliff Lane again, there's the old RAF base to the left. These things were happening in conjunction with the animal type mutilations, but we're not connecting them with that. But we were saying there's a lot of unexplained activity and unusual activity taking place at the same time. 6 a.m. in the morning, there's a large white vehicle on the old RAF base. It's disused, remember. It's not been operational since 1968, 70. I think it was lightly manned as they were winding it down till about 70, but 1968 is when it was supposed to have officially closed, and it's derelict. The buildings now are just used for cattle to shelter in, and I don't recommend anybody go up there. It's private land, so I need to get that in as well. But 3 men or beings, people, not 3 people were observed in hazmat suits at 6 a.m, spaced out, up on the base. You know, I've spoken to this bloke. If anybody wants to stand me up on it from around the area, I can actually put him in front of you. It's not just made up to create a bit of sensationalism. I'm not saying his name live on air, but if I were put on the spot by somebody in the village that says this didn't happen, I'll put him in front of you, and you'll know who he is. So then further into July, because I think that were early in July. Someone tells me it were like 3rd or 4th of July. And then further into July, a lady walking her dog at Speeton claims that she saw a triangle, a black triangle, small, flying below the cliffs in the morning. And she only saw it because there's little inlets in certain places, so she wouldn't have seen it if it were, I don't know, 50 foot down. I'm not going to say how far it was down, but when it passed this little cove, she saw it. So that were another report of something unusual. And that's not the first time. In the local papers, the Scarborough Evening News, when I found in archive, a few reports of people at Filey, saying that they'd seen black triangles flying along the cliffs from the Filey cliff top sort of viewing area near Filey Brick, seen black triangles flying up along Bempton Cliffs and Speeton Cliffs. And before anybody says, do you think there's an opening in them cliffs? I personally don't. But that's what's been reported. There's another young chap, not connected to what we're talking about now, but walking up Cliff Lane with his friends in the summer in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and they said that one was at walking pace above them, and they just watched it, absolutely nonchalant, not really bothered. He's told me about it, silent. He says, and it just went straight over cliffs and out to sea. Yeah. So nobody's saying these can't be man-made. I'm not, everything's got to become from somewhere else. Could be something that we're testing. I'd still have to question the fact that why would you fly it up a lane above 3 lads who were of school age at the time? Do you know what I mean? But there you go. So we've got the triangle, we've got the woman walking, and then there's a guy who lives in Bempton. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning his name, David Hind. He contacted me. He'd been on the back road between Bempton and Flamborough to go to one of the village shops in Flamborough, I believe. And he said there's some unusual vehicles that you might want to look at. He says tucked away inside of a field. And I went straight up and got photographs of these vehicles, these units with. They've got it were a Ram pickup American thing with a big green box on back and a dish on the top. And they were all over the place. Whilst me and Bob Brown were up on the cliff tops one evening in July, the same time as these vehicles were seen, I received a phone call from a guy who said his daughter were driving home from Garton on the Wolds, which would have been about 8 miles inland, and she'd seen a UFO. We'll get to the vehicles again in a minute, guys. and a black tube with a red line running through it. And he's telling me about this whilst I'm stood with Bob on the cliff tops. And bearing in mind, I'd been and got the photographs of these other military vehicles. So after he'd given me the sighting, and I asked him if I could speak at length with him the next day, I said it weren't really a good time to speak, whilst on cliff tops. He said, but there's something else. He said, there's a strange military vehicle parked in a field between Gart on the Wolds and Sledmere. And he described exactly what up at Bempton. So, were they observing? Or were they actually monitoring something that's ours, that's been tested? Well, I can't say. But you've got a rich combination of strange phenomena taking place. And as a side note, we've got the animal mutilations as well happening. Roe deer, badger, fox, sheep, and the most unusual one of all for me, the harbour porpoise. Because below the cliffs and on the shoreline around the area, rock anglers were finding harbour porpoise. If people don't know what they are, they're about 4 foot long, and it's a small marine mammal, like a small dolphin. But they've got huge 3-inch or 2 to 3 inch holes through the jaws, which is a strange wound to inflict on an animal. It's a mammal, isn't it? But what were we finding primarily with the sheep and the roe deer? The face is stripped of skin. I'm sorry for sounding macabre, people. Some people have a sensitive nature. I'm not meaning to, but they've got ears and eyes removed. And in many cases, there were nothing touched on the carcass. This is why it were proper boots on ground research, not sat behind a desk taking reports. I were on them fields at 4:30, 5 in the morning, finding these things because people were saying, oh, it'll be a fox, it'll be a badger. But the thing were, if you didn't find them within a day, 2 days, then those animals would find them and predate on them. Yeah. But I was finding them before this had happened. And getting all the photographic evidence. I've got hundreds, not just 10 or 20, hundreds and hundreds of photographs. Mm. In Truth Proof 3, we only put a few in, and we put them in black and white because they were too graphic. So, okay, let's go on. What you got to ask me?
Yeah, well, I can testify to the fact that you're finding these animals, sheep especially, with these wounds, totally odd wounds, as you'll say, strips of flesh. Now, I was with you on the cliff top 1 year not so long ago and found exactly the same thing. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Paul?
Yeah, that one were a little bit more unusual. I need to say that I think it were a front left leg that were gone with them as well, and as well as the ears. I don't know why. The farmer noted that first. He's sharper than me on that one because he said it's almost like whatever's took a packed lunch is what he said, because there's always a front left leg gone. Not always, but So, but anyway, when I went with you, I believe this were in daytime, weren't it, Les? Not correct, very early morning, because we went to just get a bit of footage at cliff tops, and it were you that saw it. I weren't expecting to find out at that time of day, sort of thing. I think I'd been earlier in the morning, or the day before, should I say. But we walked over to it, and there's the carcass of a sheep, but his head had gone. But what was interesting, if you can find this kind of thing interesting, guys, is that if anybody's ever studied sheep, the wool comes to the back of their ears usually. So you've not got a long neck, but you've got a neck. And if you picture a paint roller, what you'd put on to roll your walls, you've got this like tube of wool. And you could actually look down, and the head and the neck had gone right down to the breastbone. Well, we couldn't find the head. We did actually scour the area, didn't we? Yeah. And it just weren't there. Nothing else had been touched on the animal. So a strange one in itself, So I don't know what to say, but when people say, "Oh, this is the work of people," I sort of move to the porpoise and say, "How come? What is the connection then?" That was happening at the same time, and then I moved to the roe deer. I could imagine somebody a bit fitter than me catching a sheep. Maybe that's possible because they can actually move a little bit if they don't want to be caught. So I could imagine somebody catching a sheep. But when we're talking about roe deer, we're looking at or a fox or a badger. They're pretty elusive creatures, fox and badger, and deer's just got speed on its side. And no evidence of anything else. No evidence of snares. No evidence of bullets.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So you've got all this. You've got this massive combination of unexplained phenomena, as well as this strange military presence.
Yeah.
The UFO sightings, the triangle sightings, a multi sort of phenomena, sort of paranormal soup, as we've termed it in past. Of things happening. So, any more questions, Les?
Yeah, I think at this point, Paul, we're just going to run to one more question, then we will go to the break. Okay, and this is from Mario Jagger, or Jager. Apologies for any wrong pronunciation there. And it sounds like a great question. Who and what do you think the Men in Black are? What do you think the Men in Black are that you have mentioned in the encounters with these individuals in your books?
It's a good question. What are they? But I mean, if there's something created by this other intelligence to sort of, I don't know, unnerve us and find out what we know. I would wonder why they'd need to find out what we know, because they're so far in advance that they can actually take us, and sort of, from what I can see, they know what we're thinking. I don't know what the motives are. I don't think it's actually. I don't think that it's humans dressed in strange attire to unnerve people, because if we stick with Cliff Lane after this break, Bob Brown had an encounter with what we'd call the Men in Black after being on the cliff tops with me. I didn't. After being on the cliff tops with me that night, when the guy reported us getting on the wall, seeing his daughter seeing the black tubular UFO with the red line on it, and there's a few more bits that we saw that night. But we'll touch on that when we come back, shall we, Liz?
Yeah, that's fine, Paul. Right, at this point then, we are going to go to a little 3-minute break, and I've just got to do a little plug for your daughter Jessica, who does the vocals in the track that we've included in the break. So hope you enjoy it, folks, and we'll be back very, very shortly. We are back, Paul, it looks like.
Very good.
Right. Okay, we're going to continue with the questions, Paul, and I think I've got a good one here from Joe. Hi, Paul. Did anyone see any strange lights over Hesel in Hull last night around 7:30 at night? Several balls of light and bright spheres moving about and then suddenly disappeared.
This is a good question, and one that we can put, I think, basically to the people in the chat room, and we can ask it on truthproof.uk website as well, because this will be Joe who contacted me while I were in town today, I believe, and I asked her to ask the question in case I forgot, and thank you, Joe, because I had. I'd forgot to ask it, should we say. So my first thoughts were that it could have been some kind of laser lights, but we know that current climate, I don't think there's any laser shows that would be using them kind of lights at the moment, with COVID and what have you. So it would be good. We've got a time there, guys, with Joe's question, and a description of what was seen. So if anybody in the whole area did see this light phenomena, be it sort of man-made or other, tell us about it. Tell us tonight, or get in touch, truthproof.uk, and we can sort of tell Joe and make a report of it. We'd probably be able to solve it, but if we can't, it's even more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there should be lots of witnesses to that, and if Joe saw it, then obviously a lot more people out there potentially could have seen it, and they may actually contact you, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question from Tony Worrell. Hi, Paul. Any recent sightings of the so-called shug monkey? Shug monkey or similar?
Well, not that I know of, but the actual sightings of these cryptid type thing does differ. I've got a sighting from a farm hand up at Waldgate on the crossroads who claimed that they'd seen a Bigfoot. But of all places, at Waldgate, there's a wood there. It's not massive. It wouldn't support anything like that, but we've said before that I know that a lot of people disagree with me, but I don't think that these things are living and breathing and reproducing in the UK, but I do think they're real. We've just got to decipher what the real is. But not far from Waldgate, jump into your question, there were a guy who lives in Grindale back in the 70s, and he were poaching. Everybody knows what that is, sort of catching rabbits and hares and pheasants. I don't mean with dogs, I think he was setting snares. For that reason, I'm not going to say his name or anything, but he sort of lived and worked that area for many, many years. And he claims one sort of frost-covered morning, whilst with another guy, he says he's looking over these fields, and anybody that knows it, I think we touched on it, it's called Fox Cover Wood, and the wood's obviously not changed its name, it's still there. And there's a large, the field is higher at one side than it is at the other, so it drops down. So if the edge at one side is 4 foot, it'll be like 7 or 8 foot at the other side, because there's different levels. He said, and I just happened to look, he said, and this thing leapt over the hedge and landed, he said, and it landed as though it were on Velcro. It just didn't move. And he described that if it were a horse or a dog, it would have gone forward, but it didn't move. And but what intrigued him was, he said it looked like a baboon. He said it had a huge mane, like a lion's mane, and it had a baboon-type face, but it was big, really big. I'm not going to swear, because he said it had a thin waist, large rib cage, and he said it had no backside, but he didn't use the word backside. And he said, and it looked at us, and me and my mate, he says his mate were whistling it. He says, I couldn't believe him. He says, I was looking under edge for a fence stave in case it came across. He says, but we'd have had no chance. He says, this thing was huge. And then it ran off into the woods. So as crazy as that story sounds, that guy has lived in that area and still does, and that's the only time he'd ever seen anything like that. That's his only story of anything like that. So, and that's that is the nature of these one-off sightings. And Deborah would tell you this, because you not just in this country, you've got serious trained hunters who get into these remotest of places in America and in Alaska and hunting moose and hunting bear, and they have one sighting. They have one sighting in a lifetime of hunting. So before that, prior to that, they would have probably laughed and poured scorn on anybody that said they'd seen something that they call there a dogman or a Bigfoot. But obviously, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So I know we've gone round a few sort of corners there with that question, but
I've got a good question from Mick Park. Welcome to the stream, Mick.
Hi, Mick.
Yeah,
good to hear from you.
Yeah, kind of a general UK one. Any recent UFO landings in the UK, Paul? So UK wide, have you heard of any accounts of UFO landings at all?
Well, no, not recently, Mick. But I tell you what's interesting. We just put it on website. A guy called James Garrard, and he told me I could use his name. He lives in Bridlington. I no need to set name road he lives in. But at 1 a.m, and what day are we today? We're Friday, so I think it was Thursday morning at 1 a.m. Because he's only just told me about this, and we just entered it onto the website. He said, and this will get to Mick's landing in a minute. He said that he was looking over towards a place called Haysthorpe, and he could see a large red object in the sky, and fairly low down. And he said, I'm trying to work out what it could be. He said, and it moved lower and then went back up higher. He says, I thought, could it be a drone? But this is 1 a.m. I suppose there's always that possibility. But he said it resembled, he said, if you got a large cluster diamond ring, and when you move it and you see all the diamonds sparkle, he said it were like that, but it were red and sparkling. But the same guy, Jim, he said to me, James, he said to me a few years ago, in between where you drive from Bridlington to Nafferton and Driffield, there's a road that takes you up to, it says Staxton on it, you can go up that road, and there's a little wood, and he observed what he thought looked like a star but slowly grow and come down and land in the wood. He says, and as it landed in the wood, it changed colour and then just shut off. So I got two stories. We haven't followed that one up yet. I want a few more details off Jim Garrard before we write about that one. We've just got his account from the other morning at 1 a.m. But that's the only landing. But that's not recent, Mick. That's not recent. But I dare say, I don't know, strangest things happen, and you find out the strangest things when you least expect it. Let's put it this way. A few days ago, there's something that me and Les will be following up in a few weeks' time, COVID permitting people and social distancing, but if we get the chance, and we're off up to North Yorkshire, and we're off to film and speak to a guy who claims he's seen 2 wolves. Now we're not talking cryptids. He described 2 wolves, and I don't want him to change this. I don't want him to change it into, well, they could have been if they'd have stood on 2 legs. I just want his story because it's so unusual. And that was this week that he claims he's seen these. The only, not crazy bit, the most interesting part of this guy's story is that when his headlights hit these things, motorbike headlights on a motorbike at 5:30 in the morning, he said they looked like they were smiling at him. I said, do you mean they were baring the teeth? He said, no, they looked like they were smiling. And weird, isn't it? So as I say, I should have been actually going on Sunday to see this guy, but it's not looking like that, so it's going to be next week. And God willing.
What amazes me, Paul, about these accounts is that these people who are coming forward with these accounts, who are prepared to meet with you, who are prepared to go on film about it, you've got to throw away the frivolity that they might have in their mind of just putting a story out there. So there's got to be some substance in what they're saying.
Absolutely, Les. Absolutely. I mean, obviously there's going to be people out there who are just doing it for, I don't know, a bit of publicity or whatever. But
laughs and giggles, yeah.
Well, then people, not just laughs and giggles. Then people will go to your local, not your local, your sort of papers that everybody wants to read on a Sunday morning or something daft like that. But they're not after any other gain. They're there telling me a story or telling us a story that's absolutely, for want of a better word, incredible. And I put it to him. I said, would you be willing to go on film and tell us about this, and we'll put you over in the most serious light that we can, because we wouldn't be entertaining if we didn't genuinely believe that the people stood in front of us were telling the truth. Because as we've said before, we have got people who've come with reports like this, and I won't insult them, but we'll not be following them up. Yeah. But for Dark Forest, and once again, I've said this before, we've got some absolutely amazing witnesses, first-class people.
Yeah. Okay, just to move on with the questions then, Paul, I think I've got one from Sol Datic. Welcome to the stream, Sol, if you're still in the stream. Does Paul have any further info on the satanic/witchcraft rituals in his area?
There is a little bit more, and I've just seen my other daughter in there, Laura. Hi, Laura. And there is a little bit more, and it's difficult because I've been trying to get this guy on film, not to put the film out, but simply because it's there as proof of what I've been talking about all along. If he will say what he actually observed, and it's a difficult one to talk about until I've actually spoken to him and he's gone on film and said it, and there's no need to trick the guy or anything like that. He's agreed to do it because he said he's seen this ritualistic practice taking place. In the first book I said it were alleged. Second book I were a bit closer. Third book, yeah, I'm confident to say that there's something to it. And let me just say, hand on heart, I don't believe that it's got anything to do with what were happening to the animals and things like that, because all sorts of suggestions have been put forward as to it's people doing it and it's black magic or some kind of dark ritualistic practice. I don't personally believe that, and I've no reason to say why. I do think it's something other. I mean, I really do think it's something unexplained, as in truly unexplained phenomena, maybe connected to the light forms, maybe connected to UFOs. I don't know. I'm not in a position to say, even though I spent so much time on them cliff tops alone in the early hours of the morning. I could have just made stories up and said I'd seen lights, I'd seen this happening, I'd seen that, but I haven't. I didn't come away with any solid answers, Les. But I do believe, due to the fact that I was the only person up there for many months, over a year, to be honest with you, it's not people that were doing it.
Right, okay. Braveheart576 asks, any stories from Paul about people going missing in the woods? I think we touched on this one a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week. Have you got anything on that, Paul? People going missing in woods?
No, I haven't. And there's a lady who writes about that kind of thing on the internet, Steph Young. I mean, you might find information, what Steph writes, and I've spoken with her, and she's got some interesting stuff. But no, I haven't. And despite, we know that people have actually vanished up on these cliff tops, and I just find it a really sensitive thing to talk about, because it's somebody's son, it's somebody's nephew, it's somebody's mum or dad, and we haven't got a conclusion. I have written about these things, but with utmost respect, because I haven't got an answer for why these things have happened. All I know is they've happened in an area where other unusual things and unexplained things happen. So yeah, I mean, as regards woods, no, I haven't got any information that could help you with that. Sorry.
Okay, Melanie Hill is asking, welcome Melanie to the show. Do you think the phenomena is linked to particular properties and locations? I think she's referring back to your house and your early childhood encounters. Well,
maybe not the property, but it's difficult. As regards what's happening around this particular area, I do think location is key, and I've said that many times. But the bulk of the cryptid sightings, location is key, and there's pockets of of sightings. There's pockets of different types of phenomena, and there's areas where lots of different phenomena seem to happen, yet they don't seem related to one another. It seems an impossibility that the cats could be somehow connected to the light forms, yet they're seen around the same area. But these areas crop up time and time again. These same areas, the repeat areas, and they're not just in East and North Yorkshire. They're all over the world. And I reckon that there'll be people in this chat room who aren't familiar with our area, who know that unusual things are happening in their area. I suggest that you get into a library when you can, or some kind of archive, and look. And when you find something really strange that's happened, you will find other bits that are happening. You can just pack meat around the bone. It's there.
I think that's good information, that, Paul, because obviously your boots on the ground, and a lot of your research is based around visiting the library and seeing the microfilm files of old newspaper reports and things like that, isn't it?
Libraries, you know, and I mean, you know, when we say it's boots on the ground, you know, a lot of people use the laptop and that. There's that to use. That's a brilliant tool. But I've sat in Bridlington Library, in reference library, for years before I wrote Truth Proof 1. And people, not that why would people want to know? But I've spent absolutely days in that library, going from 1930s to where the actual microfilms stop in 2010. They stopped mid 2010. They told me they were going to get more done, and they haven't. But I've gone through every paper and had a diary and spent loads of money, because when you want a copy, it's 50p a copy. If you know when you print them off.
Yeah.
And you know, them things probably aren't seen when you're doing these books. People think you just spit all this information out. You've got to contain it in your head, obviously, but these are the kind of things you've got to do. You've got to travel to different areas and look, you know, and look in their archives. If you want to, if you really want to find things to pack around what you'll consider an interesting story.
That's it. Because a lot of this investigation work is really investigating this slice of anomaly, this incident, that incident, and it's joining all these things up in time, and then you get the bigger picture, don't you?
You do, Les. Yeah, you do.
You know, the bigger picture probably you won't just get from a single press report.
You won't. But what I find interesting is you end up going off down another road looking at something else.
Yeah.
And the coincidences that sort of occur, that you know, it's like a tripwire, a spiraling effect of things that are happening. It's like we've said before, you throw this big stone in pool and all these ripples come out, and the phenomena seems to touch other things and, ignite other things. I'm sure other people have. I'm not alone in seeing this. I know I'm not, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Right. A question is coming from Ricky84, and welcome to the show, Rick. Question for Les. Now, it's not often I get a question aimed at me, Paul. So here goes.
What is it, Les?
Yeah, well, it's what got your interest started in this field of unexplained phenomena. So the question is aimed at me, Paul. What got me interested? Well, I'll tell you exactly where I come from on this. Many, many, many years ago, I used to read, going back to what you say, Paul, the library, and I used to read these ghost story books. And one of the most famous books ever out there was a book written on the most haunted house in England, and that was called Borley Rectory in Essex. I think it's Essex or Sussex border, somewhere around there. And that intrigued me because of all these accounts, and it's not unlike what you were saying, Paul. It's, you know, it's accounts from witnesses and all adding to the full story. Well, the full story went over quite a few years, and it was written, this book, by an investigator from the Paranormal Society called Harry Price. Now, unfortunately, over the years, his reputation, obviously, I think this happens with a lot of investigators over time. They try and bring him into disrepute and things like that. So whether that happened in this case, I don't know. But yes, I did get started by reading ghost book stories, and then it got me thinking onto the UFO side of things. And obviously, I'm a bit of a free thinker, and obviously I think there's more outside than what we experience. What we experience in this life, in this present time now, me on the stream, there's a lot more going on around us, and I truly believe that. So yeah, that's where I've come from really in my thinking. So I hope that answers the question, Ricky, and we'll move on, Paul. Deborah Eaton, welcome, Deborah. Hello, could you tell us any more about the old man that lived in the woods? I'm sure you said you would try to get some more information, or did I dream it? She's asking.
No, you might have dreamt it. There is somebody who lives in the woods, and he's an interesting guy, that's all I can say. He's still there, taking food from time to time, and I sort of keep an eye on him for Salvation Army. I won't say we're great friends, but because I find myself all over these spots, I happen to know just whereabouts he is. And incidentally, I've asked him many times, every time we meet, I say, "What's happened? Seen anything?" And then, apart from seeing the black cats, he's not got lots to tell me, but I do actually suspect that he knows more. I mentioned David Hines' name earlier in relation to the military vehicles and him telling me about it. And I see David's in the chat room. Hi, David. Good to hear from you. And David had a brilliant sighting, I don't think you mind me saying, at very close to a place called the Honeypot Public House, in between Bempton and the sort of Dotterel roundabout. One evening, I'm not sure at year, I think it was 2007, but he'll no doubt correct me if I'm wrong. Coming home, I think he'd been home to he'd been to Malton, he'd been doing something anyway this particular evening, and it might seem odd, David, me talking about you while you're in room, but it's an interesting story. And as he's driving home near the pub, these orange spheres, I think he said 2 orange spheres just lit up above the pub, and he's thinking they're strange, and eventually pulled his car over. I'm not sure of the sequence of what happened, but I think he turned his lights off and the lights went out. He'd watched them for quite a while at this stage, but he turned his lights off. I think you said you wound the window down and listened, and there was no sound. And the typical of what we were looking at over at sea. And where this public house is, you're only probably 2 miles as the crow flies from the sea, if that. And eventually he realised that he'd got to get home. You know, his partner would be thinking, where is he? Because he'd said what time he would roughly be home. I've probably been watching him for 15 minutes. And put his lights back on. Guess what? The lights come back on. Now that's some kind of awareness. You can't tell me that there isn't some kind of intelligence behind what was happening. And I think eventually David just drove home. But it was an interesting sighting. David would probably tell it better than me. Obviously, because nobody can tell it better than the witness. They're the ones that actually saw it. That's why I love these people that sit in their armchairs and decide that they know what somebody saw. You know, and you know, you get somebody saying that they've seen something. They sound really credible people, and you get an expert who wasn't there, but he's an expert, and he knows better, or she knows better. And the world's full of these people, you know, and that's what we've got to do as a voice. Speak up for these people if they're telling truth. That's what it's about. Right, lad, fire away.
I've got Emu Cat. Welcome, Emu, to the stream. And Emu is saying, I believe stone and wood in old houses helps hold particular vibrations. Do you consider all the work you have done in restoring old buildings has had an effect on you?
Just read first. I thought you were on about a wood at first. What did you?
No.
Oh,
she's asking about you've been involved in the building trade and you've been worked in buildings. Do you think stone and wood hold particular vibrations?
Yeah, I was thinking of a wood, stone and wood. I'm thinking, I don't know where that place is. Yeah, they probably could hold almost like impressions or tracings of things in time. I don't know. I mean, they say that the walls, the Wailing Walls of York, and people hear the sounds. I've been in the woods at the back of Danes Dyke and heard this electronic type voice. It doesn't sound like ancient people. It sounds more robotic. But yeah, I suppose bricks and mortar. Well, the old memories. You've only got to look at them, and you pass your old house, and you can instantly, as a human being, we remember the things, the laughs, the giggles. We remember what were happening in them places. Maybe our memories that we can't see and feel and touch, but they're there. Maybe they do impregnate the fabric of buildings and stone and wood. I don't know.
Okay, I've got a question from CE5 Kent, UK. Frequencies were recorded by the E2 Hawkeye from the Nimitz encounter. Have you ever recorded a particular reoccurring frequency? So I guess is referring to the when you've been on Bempton.
Well, maybe, but we've tried it all over. We're no experts with the electronics. There's a guy in Bridlington who is, and he's built some brilliant equipment, and I have a friend who's got knowledge of radar as well, and he's seen what he's been doing, and he's really sort of impressed. This guy's he's not in best of health, so we was picking his time before we go up onto the cliff tops again. But yeah. I think we said before, I mean, we took laptop up, we took these receivers he'd built himself, and they're not just cobbled together, he's built with the proper components, and we picked up this band of energy that he claims shouldn't have been there. I'm not qualified enough to say it shouldn't have been there. I know when we went up with Andrew Collins and we took electrical equipment up, all is failed. I go up there, and they're not old bits of gear. I've recently spent quite a lot of money on a thermal camera. The battery life apparently is 4 hours, we know it is because we've had it in forests in North Yorkshire, and it's brilliant. But it's drained on me up there on them cliff tops for some reason within like 30 minutes. Steve Ashbridge's thermal camera won't operate up there. It always drains. There's a lady comes up called Amanda, and she's got a Psionics camera, which is absolutely incredible for low light. She's not been able to use it for more than 10 or 15 minutes. The battery's drained. I don't get that with my Sony camera, I've got to admit. I don't know why. I have no explanation. There are some strange electrical anomalies that take place up there. Bob's got a half-decent tri-field meter, cost him several £100, and he'll have it on as we're walking. We'll say we'll walk a mile down cliff tops, and nothing happens. Might do that for 2 or 3 weeks. He's not holding it thinking, oh, let's get some. But one particular night, this thing will just go daft. Literally off the scale. You know what I mean? So it's strange. I don't know why this electrical phenomena occurs. Last night up there with Steve Ashbridge, literally for about 10 seconds, there was a really, really high-pitched ringing sound. I've heard it once before with Steve's partner, Kelly. And Steve was up with us as well. And to the point where Kelly had got her hands on her ears, she couldn't stand it. And it's got me thinking, is it some kind of infrasound or something like that? It's like a shrew. If anybody's heard the little shrew, the mouse, on amplified and sort of, I don't know, trebled. It's a weirdest sound. I just heard it for seconds last night, and then it stopped. It was after we'd heard that bang. You know, but that was the only strange stuff that happened. But me and him instantly started to feel edgy.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So where's this frequency from? Is it from under your feet? Is it?
No, it's just, you can hear it. It's just audible.
It's just in the atmosphere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, the last time that I heard that, Les, and the last and first time I heard it was with Kelly, Steve's partner, and Steve on the cliff tops probably 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard it since, and I thought I was going nuts. I said, can anybody hear that? And Kelly couldn't. She got her hands on her ears. She said, we're going to have to go if this don't stop. And it did stop.
Yeah.
Not when she said that, but it did stop. But last night, just for a few seconds, it come on.
Well,
and I don't know where that come from.
Yeah, that's intriguing. I think there's a few more anomalies with electronic equipment. I've lost a torch, and you've lost a torch, Paul.
Yeah, that's just clumsiness on our part, I think.
Yeah, it's probably, we could probably put that down to something else, I think, there, Paul. But yeah it's right then. We're going to go through some more questions. Deborah Hartswell is asking a great question, Paul. Even I don't know the answer to this one.
Well, I won't know it.
So yeah, you're definitely onto a loser here. How old were you when you first remember seeing something weird?
That's a difficult one, but I think it were about 1966, and I mean, it might have been 67, but I don't think it were any time before that, because and I don't want to labour on what it was, but it was the time that my dad woke me up to look at this sphere of light near the cooling towers of Mexborough Power Station, and after that, that's when the strange stuff started to happen. And I've talked before, using examples as a fisherman on cliff tops who saw the unusual star, and he's observing it thinking, I don't remember seeing that star before, and seconds later it were on him. Almost like an intermind connection where the phenomena becomes aware of you when you become ultra aware of it. And maybe that's what happened looking at that object in Mexborough all them years ago. You know, once you start looking, they say when you start looking into the abyss, it looks back at you, and I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 year old, Deborah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, that, Paul. Mark Rhodes is asking, hi, Paul, and you've got to answer this one truthfully, Paul. Have you ever seen a dog man? Have you ever seen a dog man?
No. We've seen something very unusual with Andy Ramsden. I couldn't possibly say what it was, if I'm being truthful. We'd been on the cliff tops, I think it was 2016, very dark, horrible night. And there's about 43-inch 3-bar wood fence around part of it. And some of the cliffs you've got 10 foot and you can just drop straight off end, and some you could walk 30 foot. You'd still drop off end, it's sheer. But this particular night, my peripheral vision, I caught something running on all fours. It cleared the 3-bar fence. I shouted to Andy to look at this, but he could hear it going up the field. It was a cream underbelly, which suggests it could have been a deer, but I wouldn't have a clue what a deer would be doing on edge of cliff. I've spoke about this before, and people always assume, because I never said different, but I didn't. It were not planned, that something had come up the cliffs. I don't think it would have been possible. The rocks would be too loose. The chalk cliffs would be too loose. But it was on the edge of the cliff, and it was big, and it was heavy on its feet. So we could have wrote it off as a deer, even though it were heavy on its feet. And then a short time later, it started to drizzle. So we'll get to your question. As we're walking back, I put a powerful torch over into the fields, and we lit up some weirdest coloured forward-facing eyes, a sort of, I don't know, almost a pinky yellow. It was a strange colour. And I've got a Sony VX2100 camera in the bag, and I've got a Canon DSLR camera. And Andy's frightened. He can see these eyes, and they're fairly high up at this stage, and they're big. And I says, I'm going to go and have a look what it is. Probably stupid, I realised, but I got the Canon camera, I held it to my waist, and I went walking across the field. Andy will tell you this, and he's shouting, don't go, come back, taking pictures. And each time this thing, it were almost lazy in its eyes, because you could see its eyes close, and then it looked away, and I couldn't see it, and then it'd appear again a little bit further back looking at us. And I got halfway across the field, and I realised that I weren't gaining anything here. It kept moving back. So I started coming back, as Andy had asked me, and put the torch on again, but it were there again. It had come closer, but it were on the floor. It had dropped to the floor. Andy, I'm sort of walking, taking pictures. Andy claims that its face looked sort of flat, like a almost human face, but big. And I would only concentrating on eyes and taking pictures and trying to keep this camera from getting wet through as I'm walking, because that was actually my wife's camera. When we got home, we'd got pictures of the eyes. I think Chris Turner's got most of them pictures. I've got them as well, where I used them in bringing down the light, I think, or the Bempton one that he did. But all we've got is pictures of eyes, and the camera's not equipped for night shots, so in most of them we've got motion blur because I'm walking towards this thing. But so in answer to your question, no, I've not seen one of these things. So I suppose seeing is believing, and but nobody's seen what I'm calling the night people. But I'm not expecting people to just believe it. But I tend to go with my gut feeling, and at the risk of repeating myself, when you've got good, credible witnesses with no relation to one another from different locations reporting seeing something very similar in the same location or within miles of it, you've got to start to think to yourself, there's some reality to this, there's something real to what these people are reporting, because they're either all liars, they're all getting lucky and they're reporting the same thing, because the span years, these sightings, they're not just all coming in like last week because we've started Dark Forest, the span years. And yeah, and I firmly believe that this thing's out there. But as I said at the very start of this podcast, we've got to establish what is real. What is the real? The real, are they real as in flesh and blood, or are they something other? And I believe there's something other. Are they remnants from an ancient time? But, you know, such as like the shaman at Starcar who were practicing ritualistic magic. The archaeologists believe they were. They've found evidence of mass butchery, animal butchery, and evidence that these people were practicing shamanism. If we jump to other cultures all around the world, we find that similar practices were happening long before continents interacted with each other. Yet they were all sharing a similar knowledge that they couldn't have known about. And they were all telling similar stories. The lion men of Sierra, the leopard men of Sierra Leone, you know, all the Mayans, all the other deities, all these people have a similar story and a similar, we'll call it shape-shifting if you want to call it shape-shifting, but a similar stories to, and the knowledge could not have passed from one culture to another because nobody had reached these continents when these things were happening.
Yeah, well, that brings
off again then, Brad, sorry.
Yeah, that brings me to another question, and I think we've touched on it before, but we'll touch on again tonight. JJ is asking, do you think that dogmen have actually attacked people? And if you do think so, have these incidents been covered up?
Well, I couldn't possibly say. And I'm not covering it up. I can only deal with what I know, and I don't know a great deal. I've no more answers than most people asking the questions. So I don't think it'd be fair to say yes. I believe that dogman have attacked people, because I really don't know. I mean, most of the people in here maybe have heard me talk about the three para who witnessed this strange creature on the cliff tops. Now, he were with another man and two terrier dogs. Whatever it was could have quite easily dispatched them two people, but it didn't. So why? A lot of the time, people report the absolutely overwhelming fear that they feel looking at these things. It's almost as though they're feeding on the fear, they're projecting the fear. And when you jumping totally away from everything that we're looking into, when you read other people's reports, and Deborah will have come across this as well, the intelligence that these things purport to have is incredible. Tapping on windows, trying door handles. That's not the actions of something like a flesh and blood animal. It's got some added intelligence, and it's the fear. It is the fear that I believe that they're tapping into, you know. And so when we're saying have they killed people and eaten people, I think that they're feeding on fear, these things. Yeah. And, you know.
That kind of leads, yeah, that's a good answer there, Paul. Riv.tier Jeanette, what if we just tap into the parallel universe when this stuff happens? Are we tapping into a parallel universe?
We could well be, you know, and I know there'll be people of science and academia that will know tons more about this than me, but years ago when we were looking at the Wolds light forms, me and Steve Ashbridge, before we got to East and North Yorkshire, and the farmers up there were reporting seeing these strange lights, which are still occurring, but we're just following richest vein of unexplained phenomena, and that's where we're getting a sort of kicks, if you like. But I said these lights, when they were lighting up, it was like looking at a cartoon in sky, like almost like a tear in the sky. They didn't look like they belonged there, almost as like a transfer that had been stuck. And then someone said earlier, you know, do you think it's a hologram? And you know, it's a good question. You know, it's a good point. Is it holographic and being projected by some other intelligence, though? Because I don't think it's been projected by man, because it's been happening before probably we had the technology to do that. So, just my views on it.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, if you go back in history, and you've done the research there as well, Paul, lots of these things have been reported through history. You know, they're documented in books, in whatever parchments or whatever they wrote on in them days, tablets of stone even, I guess.
Yeah.
If you go into caves, you'll see everybody's seen the pictorials of what the cavemen did of I don't know, flying saucers, if you want for a better
the
way.
petroglyphs and all the references going back not just hundreds, but thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And then obviously we talk about the folklore as though, I don't mean everybody does. I mean, but you know, you get people talking about it as though it were done by illiterate people. Well, as in a way, obviously they weren't as literate, but they weren't stupid. They knew what they were seeing, and they were depicting it and talking about it, oral descriptions, the best way that they possibly could of what they were seeing. We've got different words for it now, but basically we were seeing the same things. You know, could the alien, what people call the alien greys and things like that, be what people will see, the fairies and the elves and the goblins in ancient times? I think it's a strong possibility we were looking at the same things or very similar things. Just because it's folklore doesn't make it any less real and any less valid as evidence. You know, I mean, anecdotal evidence. It's such a shame that anecdotal evidence doesn't carry as much weight. Obviously, it doesn't. I mean, the ultimate proof would be to have one of these werewolf-type entities, Bigfoot-type entities, or a UFO in your back garden. You say, "Here, come and have a look at this." That would be the ultimate proof. But all we've got is anecdotal evidence. But when you've got anecdotal evidence from not just hundreds of people, thousands and thousands of people going back hundreds and thousands of years, you have to place some credibility in it. It's not all misidentification.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think going back to what I just alluded to earlier, where they found paintings and cave paintings and even going back to the pyramids, the technology used must obviously not be present in where man is at that time. You know, it's far beyond that, isn't it?
Yeah, I would agree. And you know, I've just seen Tino say, "Paul, are the lights on things seen in wet and cloudy weather conditions?" Yeah, they are. You know, we've gone up there and people have said, "Oh, we'll not see anything tonight." Will we see anything because it's a bit wet and cloudy? I say it doesn't seem to matter. These things are below cloud. That's how close they are. I mean, jumping back to Lee Hayward and my sighting, the brilliant one, that were literally in field at back of us.
Yeah.
It weren't on horizon. It was in the field at the back of us, and so I wouldn't have thought Andy Barnby, rock angler, down in the cove at Thornwick Bay. I think it was Thornwick. He's fishing for bass on his own. And if he listens to this, I don't know whether he does or he doesn't, but if anybody does who are from area, they'll know Andy because he's probably the #1 angler in the area. I'm not into angling, by the way, guys, but he's renowned for it. Won lots of competitions. But he's there. He's in the cove on his own in the night. He said, and suddenly 2 huge globes of light, which he estimated to be the size of small cars, lit up below the cliffs. We're only looking at sort of 400 or 500 yards away across the cove to the other side of Thornwick Bay. They just lit up silently below the cliffs, off the cliffs, and the sheer cliffs. It couldn't have been anybody that's climbed down and decided they're going to stick 2 lights on. You don't climb down these cliffs. Said he watched them, I don't know, short time, and then they just switched off. Carried on fishing. Short time later, they come back on. This time he thought, this is not right. This feels a bit strange, and he packed his gear up. He didn't flee in haste or terror, but he just felt this wasn't right. No sound to these things. Got in his car and decided it was time to go home. You know, so So you know, these things are seen and in all sorts of conditions and in close proximity. You know, the guy walking his Labrador dogs on Cliff Lane. Cliff Lane gets mentioned quite a lot, people. It's not necessarily because it's ultra strange. It's because it's the only route onto the cliff tops from Bempton. So that's why we mention it. But he's walking. I can't think of his name. Andrew something or other. I know I've wrote about him. 2 Labradors running about in the fields. He's watching a barn owl skimming about, and then he looks to his right, and on the cliff tops, on the path, just evening time, huge sphere of blue light, sort of mushroom shaped, hanging over the cliff, and all lights punching about inside it, sparkling and not banging, but looking like the banging, exploding inside it. Watched it for a short time, no desire to get any closer, turned back, and you know, later contacted me. In fact, David Hind, who were in chat, I don't know if he still is, put me in contact with him, and I went and sat and got a brilliant interview. He let me record him. So there you go.
Brilliant. Right, I'm going to try and whittle off some of these questions.
Well, we're not far with Cliff Lane, guys. I do apologise, but we'll try and do a little bit more on it maybe next week.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions in tonight, folks, and thank you for these questions. Obviously, we'd have no show, I don't think, Paul, if we didn't have half of these questions tonight. So, Umbraman, well, I just can't quite read this question, Paul.
Okay. We better not read it then.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try my best. Perhaps prove what is behind the harsh strangeness of cryptids, of ghosts, stroke life after death. I don't know where you're coming from, Umbraman, on that one. Can't quite understand how you wrote that, but
well, no worries. Do it again, and if we've time, we'll.
If you want to just bring it up again, Umbraman, I'll read it out.
I see. There's a question back from Tim Brennan. Hi, Tim. I'm not certain what this means. RE, the effect on Bempton cliff birds. I don't know. Obviously, we've got up at Bempton. We've got one of the largest gannet populations in the UK. You know, when they come to breed on them cliffs, there's peregrine falcons, and puffins. There's all manner of seabirds come up there. Whether it has an effect on them, I really don't know. I mean, I suppose it could. The rock anglers don't go up till after the breeding population, the adult birds leave and head back out to sea. So I think it's, I can't think of month, but they leave and then they're allowed to fish the cliff tops, which is interesting because most of my reports from these guys come obviously when they're on those cliff tops. I don't get lots of reports in between times, and I don't think it's a seasonal thing. I think it's just the fact that nobody's up there on a night during the time when the birds are breeding. But apart from probably me and Bob Brown and other people that have come up with us, and we've seen the lights, so we know it takes place year round. We know these things are seen year round. I don't really know whether it would affect the birds. I received a story or a report from a guy who was supplying parts to oil rigs. Someone tells me it was 1974. I can't remember exactly, but it's an interesting one. He was 6 miles off Bempton. He's gave me the sort of latitude, longitude. We know exactly where he was, and so 6 miles off is not far. Bearing in mind if we can see boats on horizon at 22 miles. And this particular night, as I say, supplying parts to oil rigs, he wrote that he could see strange lights, triangle of 3 lights on the cliff tops at Bempton, above though. I think it was a blue light going up and down in a spiral, up and down the cliffs. Now you can't get below these cliffs. You can get to the little coves like Thornwick Bay and North Landing, but you can't get below these cliffs, and you'd never try to get below them in the night. And this spiralling light's going up and down, and he said there was another light going up in arcs, and a light source that they couldn't see where it was from the sea, lighting up the cliff face. And I went to Lifeboat with this account because he'd done a drawing and everything for me. Well, he has done a drawing and everything for me. And the guy at the Lifeboat station sort of a bit gobsmacked because he said, well, that couldn't have been we can't say that's a training exercise. Nothing, this sort of guy on this boat supplying parts to the oil rigs is describing is anything that we would do in a training exercise. It's just a totally off the wall sighting. So, you know, that would have had an effect if there were seabirds on cliffs. That's what I'm getting at. But I don't know. And how would you stop it? And who would know? Because I can tell you now that when you go up there on a night, there's nobody up there. It's devoid of anybody. So, you know, you're pretty much on your own. I don't know. I would have said at all times of year, even in summer, because once it starts to get dark, nobody wants to be up there.
Mm. Yeah, it's a very spooky place in the dark, Paul, up there. As you say, you don't see very many people. Right then, we're just going back to the house. Deborah Eaton, do you know if the previous owners had any strange happenings in your house?
Well, they must have had, Deborah, because we know that this Reverend Willis had performed a blessing. I'm not going to say an exorcism because I wouldn't know that. All we know is that Reverend Willis was an exorcist, and can find reference to him in papers and on the net and on YouTube. I think they made films about him, and all we know is that he'd been to the house previously. And obviously when we'd moved in, we'd only been in a few weeks, when he arrived at our house, and unwittingly I let him in. I think any girls in chat now would remember me letting him in, unless it were Jess and Laura. They're probably too young, but Sarah and Gemma certainly would. And Sarah followed us upstairs, and he got to this top room and he said, I wouldn't let your children sleep in this room. And I turned round and Sarah stood behind me. I didn't know she was there. And I asked him to leave. I was polite, but I asked him to leave. I weren't blaming him. It was partly my fault as well. I should have checked who were there. Do you know what I mean? He was wanting to just do a blessing on the house. So I didn't get to know much more about him because, as I say, I asked him to leave. I think we're about wound up with this, Les, are we? Oh, goody. Yeah, fire away. I don't think I can answer this question, but go on, I saw it, go on. No. Right, guys, we'll have to get you that photograph. That's the one that Bob Brown took. It, yeah, me and Steve spoke about that last night. And for anybody that didn't hear us in previous weeks, daylight, there was myself, Bob, it was evening, just getting towards dusk, looking across at the sort of contours of the land, and Bob picked his camera up, he's taking a picture, and I asked him what he was taking a picture of. He says, there's something on hill up there. So it's not there now, though. And when he's took the picture,
yeah,
there's this very large sort of wobbly mass. It's strange. And it's clearly on the hill. Me and Gemma went straight up there. Literally, I don't know, not minutes, seconds later, we set off and went up there. There's nothing at the back of it. So what that was that appeared on the hill, I don't know. I'm not going to. It almost looked like a pile of hay that had fell over, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you know what? It's just three humps. Very strange. But there's definitely nothing there at the back of the hill, except more farmland and fields.
Of course, yeah. Right,
we've got the picture, so we will try and put there's money where his mouth is and get the picture set up.
Okay. We'll try and do that, Paul, definitely. Right, I've got one from David K. Paul, do you believe that the story that President Nixon... do you believe the story that President Nixon showed Jackie Gleason the Greys? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know enough about it, so I dare say nothing would surprise me, because I mean, when you get into the higher echelons of power, if there is a knowledge that we're not privy to, then people, they may be, even if they haven't, people say, oh, they haven't got the clearance to hear this. If we're talking about it, if we're finding out things, then you know they might get that kind of knowledge. I mean, who's to say? I can't say yet I believe it because I don't know enough about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Tina, well, you've already answered this question. It's about the lights in wet and cloudy weather. So yeah, thanks for that question, Tina.
And I think Leslie Kirby said, remember to turn mic on, Les, please.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, yeah. It just faded down a bit. I was coughing at the time, folks, so you don't want to hear that. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So we can. Tina, we've answered that question. Yeah. Mark Egan. Now here's a good question, and I know a little bit about this myself, having read up or seen YouTube videos from Richard Hogarth. Is it Richard Hogarth? Do you think there are alien bases on the moon?
Another one, who could say? There's plenty of people that do think there are alien bases on the moon, but why the moon? Why not have... I'm reluctant to call it alien, but I suppose it is alien to all that we know and understand, but could there be things under the sea? That would have been one of the things that we would have slightly touched on if we'd have carried on with Cliff Lane, because in July, at the end of July, myself and Bob, that night that the guy reported seeing the UFO, the same night that the military vehicles were about on the cliff tops and they were also at Garton on the Wolds, me and Bob saw 3 lights under the sea. 3 of anything's going to form a triangle, unless it's in a row, we know that, but looked like a nice formation. It was too big to be one object, I do believe, because I don't think it would have been deep enough if the area that it were covering, but there were 3 circular lights under the sea that but I saw, and Bob Brown got photographic evidence. Unbelievably, Bob's phone camera took a better picture than my half-decent camera. So that was that same night. So there was something under the sea, you know, and all that kind of came together. But after seeing that, that's when Bob had what we'll call his Men in Black encounter. But I don't think we've time for that one tonight, Les, now, but we could probably touch on it next week.
Yeah, sure. That's it. Yeah, we can touch on that one next week, Paul.
A large wobbly mast. Did someone randomly take my photograph? I'd take it, and Andre's on about it.
Yeah,
he's on about me.
Yeah, we've got the comedians in tonight, Paul.
No, he's good.
He's good, yeah, he's all good though. Yeah. Right, here's a good question from Resin8R, or Resin8R. Question: Paul, what do you think to the recent metal monolith found in the middle of the Utah desert recently?
Interesting. I mean, is it some kind of stunt by some artists, you know, some sculptor? Because it looks incredible. Apparently, for anybody that don't know this, but I should imagine most in room do, and I don't know tons about it, they've looked into a ravine. They've been allegedly counting sheep or goats, wild goats, some breed of goat that's sort of running about there, and looked into a ravine or a canyon, and they've seen this. It almost looks like polished steel monolith just stood on its own, just so out of place. My gut feeling is that it could be some kind of ploy for a movie or something like that. I don't know. If it isn't, it'd be amazing to see how it develops the story.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what I can see, and some of the close-up shots that they've took of this monolith, there is definitely some what look like rivets in there. And if you look at the base of the monolith in the rock, you can see a saw mark. You know,
right?
Yeah.
We've made that, haven't we? Yeah.
I think the consensus, or practically as near as, is that it's some kind of art installation.
Right. Okay.
But who knows?
So, just before we sort of finish, and I think you'll know from listening to podcasts that I do, because I've listened to a lot of other people's, and they're pushing the work just every 5 minutes. But anybody interested in the books, please visit the truthproof.uk website, and if you're in touch with me personally and you want them signing or anything like that, I will do that. And any of your sightings don't have to be from East and North Yorkshire. The website's just going to encompass anybody's sightings that's sort of credible or deemed to be credible, and we're going to put it on and try and build this up. So yeah, we want to get it out there for all UK, and we'll do the best we can. And together as a team with Les and Leslie, we'll continue to do these live streams. I'm sorry tonight ended up how it did, but no fault of Mark's, and hopefully in near future we'll get Mark on and get to hear about the Pendle Witches and the documentary that he's making, and his own cryptid sighting, which I'm very much looking forward to listening to. We're just a bit on oath, guys, tonight, and I just hope we've managed to entertain you.
Yeah, and what I've got to say is I just really want to thank everybody for all the questions in tonight. Now, we do have a lot more questions that we're obviously going to get through now, because we're practically at the end of the show, as Paul has just said. So what we'll do, we'll have a look at these questions, and I'm sure Paul will categorise and we'll go through answering some of them next week if we haven't already answered those in this week's show. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, definitely. So
hopefully nobody will be disappointed there. And so, yeah, sorry again. But I will end with one perennial question that comes up in every stream practically we've done, Paul, and it comes from, just bear with me, let's have a look, it comes from John C, the best question of the day. Yeah, John C, sorry we are a bit late, but usually we leave this question right to the end of the show. Do you think we will ever have disclosure from governments about UFOs, alien contact?
I think we're getting it, aren't we? Not necessarily from governments, but we're being drip fed it. We're being conditioned to the condition of knowing that there's a reality to it. It's just subliminally, via video games, via films, via adverts. We're familiar with what we perceive as the alien face, the typical alien face. It's almost become the norm that these things are here. I think that by the time that we've been drip fed all this information, and it might not be a planned drip feed of information, but it's happening. When they do disclose that we are being visited or that we have been visited for millennia, people aren't going to be that blown away by it. I mean, it might affect religion and other different things. It might dint their perception and their view on the world, but ultimately I don't see as it should, because we're probably all praying not praying, I don't pray as such, but we all believe in something in that great outer nowhere. We all believe that something is actually there. So I can't see that it would dint anybody's life too much if some other intelligence does make its presence known. Whether it's going to be from our government that's going to tell us, though, I don't know.
That's brilliant, that, Paul. And well, we're all like looking towards that, but obviously disclosure in some respects has already been drip fed, I think. And
just one thing, Les. Deborah says, sorry for the shameless plug. Live stream Tuesday night 8 p.m. Now, it's not a shameless plug, Deborah. People should go for it. It'll be good and entertaining.
Yeah, that's I'll concur with that, Paul. And one thing we will plug tonight, and I'll let you talk about it briefly, is the 4th Encounter OLM 2021 conference, if it goes ahead. Okay.
Well, I did speak about it the other week, and I think we've got Peter Robbins as guest speaker. I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about. I think it will be the James Forrestal lecture, and anybody that's not familiar with Peter, I suggest that you Google the guy and have a look online, and you'll find he's a fabulous talker, and his knowledge and his research is good. We've got I don't know, it's Ron Kinsella or Philip or both of them that will be talking. I've said I'll be talking, and there's a host of other people. I need to get my act together and look who else is speaking. I weren't going to do it until a few weeks ago, but I've decided to now. So yeah, I think it should be a good 2 days. Money well spent if anybody wants to go to a good UK conference. I'll also say that there's other conferences in UK that are just as good. Do you know what I mean? Chris's OLM conference is excellent. No doubt about that. But there's other conferences in UK that are well worth going to as well. And I think it's in everybody's interest to support these other places.
And then on that note, then, Paul, I think we'll bid farewell to everybody in the stream tonight. We've had a great stream. Thanks for everybody, wherever you are, UK, around the world. We'd like to thank you all for coming on tonight's stream. And it's good night from me, and it's good night from him.
Paul.
Paul, yeah. We'll get there. We'll never make a double act set, I don't think, Paul. But there we go. Okay, thanks everybody, and we are done. Thanks a lot, and good night.